But you know that there are a lot of refugees, a lot of innocent civilians, men, women, and children in that refugee camp as well, right?
This is the tragedy of war, Wolf. I mean, as you know, we've been saying for days, move south.
If you want a solid understanding of the sorts of mass atrocities that the Israeli government are currently committing in Gaza, this is a video you need to watch. So, CNN host Wolf Blitzer, who has largely been a defender of Israel, I'll get to a bit of his history in a bit, was left bewildered by an Israeli official on his show admitting to committing a mass atrocity. So, I'm going to show you this in two different clips. I'm also going to get to a response a day later from a Democratic leader, which, I mean, you'll judge for yourself. I'll also get to how this is impacting Joe Biden, and I'll also get to a clip from Republican Senator Lindsey Graham that showcases both parties are just completely out of their minds, at least in terms of leadership and where the majority of those members are. Because, of course, there are some in the Democratic Party who are trying to speak up and fight for a ceasefire. But before I get to the first clip from CNN, just to give you an idea of the mass atrocity I'm referring to here, this is from the Washington Post. Israeli strikes on Jabalia refugee camp kill and injure hundreds in Gaza. This is the largest refugee camp in Gaza. Israel intentionally, as you're going to see from this clip, dropped a bomb. Why? They were going after one commander. So a series of Israeli strikes targeting a senior Hamas commander in the northern Gaza Strip left scores of dead and wounded in a crowded refugee camp on Tuesday, as Israel expands its assault by air and land. The Gaza Health Ministry and director of Gaza's Indonesian hospital said hundreds of people were killed or injured in the attack. The blast left a deep crater and crumbled buildings. Mahmoud Basal, a spokesperson for the Palestinian Civil Defense Emergency Services, said about 20 buildings were destroyed. The breakdown of dead and wounded was not immediately clear amid ongoing rescue efforts. So the actual impact of these blasts are still not yet clear because of how massive these blasts were. And there's even an update to this, by the way, that I'll get to later, but they struck the same place again. So before I get to the CNN clip here, just quickly to kind of personalize the damage, it's, you know, when you see hundreds injured, it's hard to really comprehend what's going on. But you see a man like this. My 3 children, I lost them all. He lost 3 of his children in this blast. Let me get to the clip here from CNN. Wolf Blitzer introduces him, and you're gonna see Wolf is he seems kind of confused as to what he's hearing.
Back now to our breaking news here in the Middle East. A massive explosion at the largest refugee camp in Gaza. Joining us now is Lieutenant Colonel Richard Hecht. He's the international spokesperson for the Israel Defense Forces. Thanks so much for joining us. I want to ask you first about this massive blast that we all just saw. We saw the video at the Jabalia refugee camp in Gaza. Is there anything more you could first of all tell us about how this explosion happened?
Hi, Wolf. Thanks for having me. So we'll be coming out in the next, hopefully, hour with more data, but I can update you now that there was a very senior Hamas commander in that area. Sadly, he was hiding, again, as they do, within civilians. And that's all I can see at this point. We're looking into it, and we'll be coming out with more data as we learn what happened there.
So can you confirm it was an Israeli attack that destroyed a big chunk of that Jabalia refugee camp?
Yes, I can. We were focused again on a target, a senior commander, Wolf, and we'll be updating you with more data as the hour moves ahead.
But even if that Hamas commander was there amidst all those Palestinian refugees who are in that Jabalia refugee camp, Israel still went ahead and dropped a bomb there, attempting to kill this Hamas commander, knowing that a lot of innocent civilians, men, women, and children, presumably would be killed. Is that what I'm hearing?
That's not what you're hearing, Wolf. We're focused on this commander, again, who you'll get more data who this man was.
It doesn't matter who he was. You killed hundreds of people because you're going after one person. Imagine there's, a fugitive in your neighborhood. He's staying at a friend's house, and they decide, whoever, the police, whoever it is, military, decides, you know what, instead of going in there, getting this guy, we're just going to destroy the whole neighborhood. We're definitely going to get him, but we're also going to kill the entire neighborhood because, well, they're all human shields. They're not bringing him to us, so they're all guilty. Let's just kill them all. In what world is this normal behavior? Is this sane? In no other circumstance would this be defended. Would this make any sense in any way? Yet, as I'll get to later, because I still got more from this clip, it doesn't, whether it's Democratic leadership, whether it's Republicans, they all appeared to not care at all. Where are the people, after the big hospital disaster in Gaza, and there's a lot of both siding on who actually did that, it's very clear at this point that it's not definitive yet. Based on history, based on the history of the Israeli government lying, based on their initial posts after the hospital disaster, it seems like they did it. But let's say that's up for debate. You had a lot of people coming out to defend Israel over that. Those same people are silent now. Israel admitted to doing this mass atrocity. Where are those people? Those same people that keep defending, Israel has a right to defend itself. Does Israel have a right to kill and injure hundreds of people to get one person? It's madness. It's absolute madness. And even Wolf Blitzer there, he kind of asked the guy a few times, but why did you do this? There are people there. And he's just astonished because he can't, even Wolf Blitzer can't comprehend that they do not care about Palestinian life. And to get a little, just a bit more on Blitzer's background for context here, Blitzer is very pro-Israel. In fact, he used to be the editor of an AIPAC newsletter. It tells you something that Blitzer sounds totally incredulous, disbelieving, and horrified by the IDF spokesman's explanation for bombing a refugee camp. Let me get to the last bit of that clip.
We're doing everything we can. It's a very complicated battle space. There could be infrastructure there. There could be tunnels there. We're still looking into it, and we'll give you more data as the hour moves ahead.
But you know that there are a lot of refugees, a lot of innocent civilians, men, women, and children in that refugee camp as well, right?
This is the tragedy of war, Wolf. As you know, we've been saying for days, move south. Civilians that are not involved with Hamas, please move south.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get a little bit more information. You knew there were civilians there. You knew there were refugees, all sorts of refugees, but you decided to still drop a bomb on that refugee camp, attempting to kill the Hamas commander. By the way, was he killed?
I can't confirm yet. There'll be more updated. Yes, we know that he was killed. About the civilians there, we're doing everything we can to minimize. I'll say it again. Sadly, they are hiding themselves within civilian population. And again, we are doing this stage by stage.
Completely psychotic. They're hiding themselves. You could say that about any criminal. Oh, this criminal is living in this apartment building. He's hiding himself within the civilian population. So let's bomb the entire building. This doesn't have to be explained. Anybody with a sane mind can see how completely mad this is. And this idea that Israel's very concerned about the civilian life. This from CBC News. More kids killed in Gaza in 3 weeks than all global conflict annually since 2019. This is data from Save the Children. And this was before the blast, by the way. So more now. So they're very concerned about civilian life. Oh, we told them to move south. They didn't. We knew they were still in that refugee camp, so we just got them all. Who cares? They're Palestinians. Doesn't matter. Who cares? We are watching genocide in real time, and we are seeing the governments of the US, the UK, Europe, Canada, all defend this. All defend the Israeli government committing these atrocities. They hit it again. Because why not? No one cared the first time. Let's hit it again. From Omar Badar here. They saw the global reaction to their massacre of refugees, and they responded by immediately doing it again. Their message is simple. To hell with you and your outrage. We'll kill as many innocent Palestinians as we'd like. And Washington keeps giving them cover. This is why it's important to call out your government for supporting this, because this is what allows Israel to continue doing this. If the U.S. pushed back, if the U.S. said, we're going to forget it, we're going to cut off aid, we're going to cut off all support because you are clearly committing genocide, then they would be forced to stop because they rely on American support. They rely on the West. But instead, no. You have these countries groveling toward to Israel. And I'll get to a bit of as to what, because if you're confused, why are these governments defending? I'll get to a bit of that after the Democratic clip. But here's a video of this area from Max Fox here. You're looking at the site of a second massacre at the Jabalia refugee camp, not the one from yesterday, another one. So this is after the second one. Let me go small here. Just complete destruction. Look how large this area is. They obviously knew they were hitting civilians. They do not care. The Israeli government does not care. Here we go. Hakeem Jeffries. Let's get to this clown. This is the Democratic leader in the House. Here is his response after this mass atrocity.
So did you think that Israel violated that law today in attacking that Palestinian refugee camp in the hopes of killing a top Hamas leader?
I'm unfamiliar with the particulars on the strike, and so I'll reserve judgment, but I know that Israel is taking every effort to continue to conduct this necessary war following the international rules of warfare, and I would expect that it will continue to do that.
Following? Israel is following the international rules of warfare. UN chief says clear violations of international humanitarian law in Gaza. And this, by the way, this is even before October. We're talking for decades. They've been committing clear violations of humanitarian international law because of their ongoing apartheid, which also is agreed upon by human rights activists within the UN, human rights groups like Amnesty International, Israel-based B'Tselem, Human Rights Watch, on and on. It is very clear, even well before this, the mass atrocities and the violation of international law that Israel has been committing against Palestinians. And now it's undeniable even to those that wish to deny it. Absolute clown. And you wonder why, right? Like, it's why can't he just acknowledge the obvious atrocity here? This is at least part of the reason. Let's be clear. Democratic House leader under fire for Israel trip sponsored by lobbyist group. These, whether it's Democrats, whether it's Republicans, they get a crap ton of money from AIPAC and other Israel lobbyist groups. And by the way, these lobbyist groups, these are far-right lobbyist groups because they are supporting this ongoing apartheid, these ongoing atrocities. So these Democrats taking money from these far right-wing groups. And this, you have to imagine, at least part of the reason why they're unwilling to acknowledge what is obvious. And by the way, I link to all my sources below the video. You can read through anything I share here. So if you want to go deeper into this, you can. Of course, there's a lot more information about this, but it's all very clear. Now, before I get to a Republican and his clownishness, how's it impacting Joe Biden? So Biden's Gaza stance spurs stunning drop in Arab American support. Since clearly talking about human life doesn't matter, apparently, maybe talking about how it's going to hurt Democrats and Biden personally, politically, maybe then they'll care if they realize they may lose an election. Because this is going to have a devastating impact if they do not change course. Palestinian and Arab Americans have expressed outrage over Biden's response to Israel's bombardment of Gaza, which has killed more than 8,000 people, more than a quarter of them children. The first national poll of Arab Americans since the war in Gaza began shows how deep that sense of betrayal goes, with only 17% of Arab American voters saying they will vote for Biden in 2024, a staggering drop from 59% in 2020. Quote, "This is the most dramatic shift over the shortest period of time that I've ever seen," James Zogby, the founder and president of the Arab American Institute, which released the poll on Tuesday, tells Time. The damage isn't limited to Biden. Just 23% of Arab Americans identify with the Democratic Party, marking the first time a majority did not claim to prefer the Democrats since the Institute began tracking party identification in 96. Those identifying as independents rose to 31%, the highest it's ever been. The poll results are likely to increase concerns among Democrats about Biden's standing with Arab Americans heading into 2024, particularly in Michigan, where roughly 277,000 Arab Americans call home, and Biden won in 2020 by 155,000 votes. But the smaller Arab American populations in Pennsylvania and Georgia were also larger than Biden's margins of victory there. All three states are ones Biden flipped after Trump won them in 2016. Joe Biden, if he continues down this path of continuing to defend these atrocities, he is going to lose the next election to somebody who is, not surprisingly, but if it's possible to be worse, Trump is worse. He will lose to someone worse. And let's be clear, on this issue, he's not worse. He's the same. But this is just, again, because they clearly don't care about human life, clearly. So how about an election? How about your own position? How about your own seat, your own presidency? Do you care now? Let's get to this jackass. Here's Lindsey Graham on CNN.
Is there a threshold for you, and do you think there should be one for the United States government, at which the U.S. would say, let's hold off for a second in terms of civilian casualties? Is there a point at which you would start to question?
No, if somebody asked us after World War II, is there a limit what you would do to make sure that Japan and Germany don't conquer the world? Is there any limit what Israel should do to the people who are trying to slaughter the Jews? The answer is no. There is no limit, but here's what you need to do. Be smart. Let's try to limit civilian casualties the best we can. Let's put humanitarian aid in areas to protect the innocent. I'm all for that, but this idea that Israel has to apologize for attacking Hamas, who's embedded with their own population, needs to stop.
This is completely psychotic, ahistorical. This comparison to World War II is so stupid on so many levels. I mean, we can put aside the fact that the nukes did not end World War II. That's a whole other discussion. You can look into that yourself. I don't need to go over that. There is no army in Gaza. They don't have planes. They don't have tanks. We're talking about Hamas is the governing body that was elected in 2006. Half the people there now are children. Roughly around 7% of the current population of Gaza, though the number's probably a lot less now, actually voted for Hamas. Hamas was not the same back then as they are now. They became more extreme because they were cut off from any sort of discussions, and they were purposely propped up by the Israeli government, by Netanyahu, as a way to try and destabilize the support for a Palestinian state, because in the West Bank you don't have Hamas, and he's trying to separate the West Bank from Gaza. It's a whole, this is, bottom line here, the German army. Not the same as Hamas. Not even close. This idea that you need to bomb entire city blocks to get Hamas is, again, psychotic. Psychotic, ahistorical, I want to say stupid, but he's not stupid. He knows what this is doing. He does not care. A few last things on the point of genocide. This just happened. Top UN official in New York steps down, citing genocide of Palestinian civilians. So Craig Makaber, sorry for the pronunciation, I have no idea how to say his name, director of human rights body, accuses the US, UK, and much of Europe as wholly complicit in the horrific assault. Going on to say here, quote, the current wholesale slaughter of the Palestinian people, rooted in ethno-nationalist colonial settler ideology, in continuation of decades of their systemic persecution and purging based entirely upon their status as Arabs, leaves no room for doubt. He added, this is a textbook case of genocide, and said the US, UK, and much of Europe were not only refusing to meet their treaty obligations under the Geneva Conventions, but were also arming Israel's assault and providing political and diplomatic cover for it. This man has been in this position at the UN for 30 years. He worked as a humanitarian in Gaza. He's very familiar with what is going on there. And he stepped down because he sees the UN has no power with groups or with governments like the US, the UK, Canada, much of Europe, all not caring. The UN is powerless. So you can imagine the frustrating position that he was in, just seeing that there's nothing that he can do while this atrocity is going on. And if you want his full letter, it's a worthwhile read, by the way. So I'll link to this below the video under sources on YouTube. You can check that out. So this is from Data for Progress. Voters across party lines agree that the U.S. should call for a ceasefire and de-escalation of violence in Gaza. So they write here, to what extent do you agree or disagree with the following statements? Quote, the U.S. should call for a ceasefire and a de-escalation of violence in Gaza. The U.S. should leverage its close diplomatic relationship with Israel to prevent further violence and civilian deaths. And every single category, whether we're talking Democrat, Independent, third party, Republican, they all, majority of them, in a majority, all agree that there should be a ceasefire. Even Republicans, like Republicans, don't want to see violence. 56% want a ceasefire. It couldn't be clear. And the last two tabs here, I'm just showing you because this was discussed, this poll was discussed on Chris Hayes' show. So Mediaite covered it, and they have the clip there. But interestingly, because I was almost going to bring this in, I went to check Chris Hayes' show here. They have this is the highlights from this episode where he mentions this. It's 35 minutes long, so it's basically the entire episode, except for that segment. You can watch through this segment where he discusses this poll, how there's support for a ceasefire. For some reason, the one segment not included in this breakdown. Now, I'm not saying MSNBC always does this. I'm sure they have video. I would hope they have videos up on social media that they posted that is discussing the realities of what is going on. But you look, it's bizarre to me to whoever's doing the editing, the uploading for MSNBC to not include that segment.